Ghanaians believe that their transformation will not occur on the back of parties, but on the back of leadership. It's a question of leadership.
Hello and welcome to the Alan Speaks Primetime Show. I'm Ebenezer Mpabing. The Alan Speaks Primetime Show is a 14-part series designed to bring you a step-by-step exposition by the author of the Great Transformational Plan, Honorable Alan Kyerematen, the independent candidate who is sure to win the 2024 elections. He will expose to the extent that we as the electorate will begin to appreciate what is in there for everyone to transform the country. It's not just a plan, but he intends to use a plan that will transform the country in such a way that we will not recognize it anymore. So in the Committee of Nations, Ghana will gain the kind of respect that we deserve. Honorable Alan Kyerematen, you're welcome.
Thank you very much, Eben.
There's so much to say about you that I would like you to introduce yourself.
Oh, Eben, this sounds like an interview series, but thank you so much.
You're welcome, sir.
Well, I have always been someone who plays in the big league.
Big league.
And what I mean by that is that I started primary class 1 at the age of 4. And the reason it happened that way is that I have 2 other brothers before me. And we grew up together. And when they went into primary school, obviously I was left at home. But at the age of 4, I was making so much noise at home that I didn't understand and appreciate why I should be staying at home when my 2 other brothers were in school. So I was forced to go into primary school at the age of 4. And my parents did that only to keep me quiet, thinking that once I go, I will not perform. And then they will bring me back and I'll shut up. I'll be running around. Yes, okay. I know. But interestingly, when I went in our local palace, I'm teacher now. Yes, just go and then hover around,
yes.
Not really as a student or as people, but you just go. But interestingly, I went, and come first year, I was able to go through the exam, and I went on and on and on. And around that time, this was in the 60s, when the school that I was in had been commissioned as an experimental school, meaning that unlike in the previous schools where they would have to go through what they call Standard 7, you go through almost 10 years of primary education, Form 4. In this case, we were allowed to sit for the common entrance examination at class 6. So lo and behold, somebody who was supposed just to be hovering around the teacher because he was causing trouble at home, I was able now then to go through onto class 6. And because of this new dispensation where you could sit for the common entrance in class 6, I sat, and surprisingly I passed.
Wow.
And so I went into secondary school at the age of 9. I went to Adisada College at the age of 9, which indeed was unheard of. Because at the age of 9, you are barely coming out of.
Did you choose Adisada?
Yes, I chose Adisada. The reason why I chose Adisada was that my father, the late Dr. A.A.Y. Kyerematen, was the first head prefect of Adisada College. And a little background to that. Adisada College, which was called St. Nicholas Grammar School, started in the middle of the Cape Coast town. And at a point in time, he decided to move away to the hills, what they called Adisada Hills. And the headmaster who was then in charge of the school, called Bishop Alan John Knight, decided that he would use that opportunity to get the young boys who were in school at that time to actually construct, as masons, as carpenters, yes, to construct the new building at the saddle on the hill. And so my father then happened to be the first head prefect when the school moved on to the hill, and the headmaster, the bishop, was the first headmaster. And so because they were very close, and the bishop was like a mentor to my father, I was named after the archbishop. So that's why I'm called Alan John. Right. So I took after him. Good. So basically, I had the Adistadal spirit in me right from the beginning, named after the first headmaster, And so going there at the age of 9, it was almost like by divine inspiration. So yes, the same way I went into primary 1 at the age of 4, thinking that I would probably not be able to go through. Surprisingly, I was able to go through all the 5 years in Adisada School, and then I went on to Achimota School for my 6th form, and then on to the University of Ghana.
Why not 6th form at Adisada? Very good school.
Interestingly, I decided that I wanted to go to Achimota School. On more sober reflection, thinking about it, yes, I went to Adisada because that was my father's alma mater. Now, I went to Achimota School because somehow I wanted to go to Achimota School. But much, much later on, trying to process why I went to Achimota School, then I realized that almost invariably, it might have been through the inspiration of my mother. My mother used to be one of the very early students of Achimota School. My mother is 104 years now.
Amazing.
104 years now,
Wow.
And it's amazing. She can actually even recite scripts from Macbeth.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, Shakespeare.
Wow.
Because she played the role in school at that time. So she was in Achimota School, one of the very early people who were in Achimota School. Interestingly, she was there at the same time that President Akufo-Addo's mother was also in Achimota. So there were two of the leading young ladies who were in Achimota School. So probably that was the inspiration. Right. Although at that time I wasn't sure that it was because of that I went. But then I went to Achimota School for my 6th form, and then went to Legon to read economics. And interestingly, when I passed my A-level exams, my interest was to read law. But my father advised me, because I had admission to the law school and also to the School of Economics, the Faculty of Economics. But he advised me that he thought that it would be better I go to the School of Economics or Faculty of Economics.
Did he give any reasons?
Well, he had said that, somehow he went to all the best schools in the United Kingdom. He went to Durham. After that, he went to Oxford, and then he went to Cambridge and did his PhD.
Wow.
But with all that, he came back and decided that he was going to serve the Ashanti nation, Ashanti Mine.
Wow.
So he was the secretary to the late Otumfuo Osajima Prempeh II. I mean, he was his chief advisor. And the two of them decided to build Ashanti or Ashanti Mine, in doing so many things. So the two of them actually conceived of and developed the cultural center at that time. And later on, President Nkrumah, he came on a visit to Kumasi and saw what an amazing thing this is. But if it's only to show Ashanti culture, why not try and enhance it and let it become the National Culture Center? So he then asked my father and Otufo at that time to try and then build that into the Ghana National Culture Center. I decided, yes, I would follow his advice, and so I did economics. And but at the back of my mind, I still knew that one day I would become a lawyer. But he had also, on the advice of the registrar at that time of the University of Ghana, had suggested that you can always read law. You know, you can always read law.
So that gave you some comfort.
So it gave me some comfort. So I did economics. And then I went, I was very lucky. Right after my university education, I was engaged with Unilever. At that time, it was called UAC of Ghana.
Yes, it was
and
big.
UAC, that was probably the leading company in Ghana at that time. And somehow, as I said, by divine direction, I've always played in the big league. And at that very early age, at the age of 22, I was already a manager in the UAC.
What were you doing there?
Well, you know, UAC had so many divisions.
Yes.
So many. So originally, I was assigned to Kingsway. Kingsway, yes. Kingsway, yes.
Okay. Kingsway belongs to UAC.
Yes, Kingsway, yes.
I see.
They had Kingsway. That was more or less their commercial enterprise, trading enterprise. They had GB Olivant. They had GTP, the textiles division. Yes, that was all part of UAC. Yes. Wow. So, you know, interestingly, you know, Ghanaians, they are always very humorous because they were almost into everything. So they started calling the UAC until Africa collapses in UAC. Yeah. But of course, they had
they were everywhere.
Branches everywhere in Africa. And that was the beginning of my professional career and professional life. And I was very lucky that I also was able to move so fast within the career ladder in UAC.
So when did you become a lawyer? When did you decide to go?
So whilst I was working with UAC as a corporate executive, I had still the dream of reading law at the back of my mind. So I decided then that I would start my law program whilst I was there. So interestingly, at that time, Professor J.E. Mills, you see, sometimes these connections do not come on the radar unless people get to realize it. That people were surprised that even though Professor Mills was in NDC, I was in NPP at the point in time. I was contesting within our party primaries, and he was contesting, you know, within So people were amazed at the way we clicked, you know. It was because when I decided to read law, you know, he was the one who actually encouraged me. Because when I was in Legon, he was my hall master. Of course, when I came out of Legon, and I was lucky to become a UAC manager at that time, literally, in those days, if you're a UAC manager, then everybody had to come to you. Because can you believe that at that time, even to buy a tin of milk, you needed to go and plead with a manager, with a UAC manager or UTC manager, just to be able to have...
You get a chit.
A chit, you know. So, you know, all my professors, Kofi Kumado, Professor Mills, all of them, you know, they had now their student who now was a big man at the age of 22. And I looked after them.
And we're coming for chits to go and get provisions.
You know. Can you imagine that even at that time? So I had a very close relationship with my former professors. And it was Professor Mills who really encouraged me to read law. Right. So I was still working with UAC when I graduated from the School of Law.
They actually gave you permission to do the course?
And it was the first time that they were allowing somebody to read, because originally when I went to, in those days, all the big men were from Manchester, from corporate headquarters, right. All foreign corporate executives. And they were wondering why somebody in commercial and mechanized management, being so lucky, rising so fast, and with such a heavy schedule, would still want to read law,
So
but
they encouraged you?
They encouraged me, it was very unusual. They agreed to allow me to read law. And when I was able to graduate, they actually sent me a congratulatory note from corporate headquarters in Manchester.
Yes.
Commending me for that.
Wow.
So it was good that I took the opportunity to do that.
But
then after that, or whilst I was there, and it's very interesting, I'm saying this just for the benefit of the younger people who are coming up. You know. Somehow I realized that although I was rising very fast in the corporate sector, there was something that was always missing, I thought, that in the corporate sector, unless you are at the very top, the strategic decision making would not always be open to you, because most of the corporate decisions are made from headquarters. Yeah. And it happens in most corporate entities. But there was that eagerness that, but no, you have to understand why you're doing what. But all the same, I thought that if I went out of the corporate sector into another institution where I could start appreciating where I would have the opportunity of doing more strategic thinking, strategic analysis, and also get a little bit of public sector experience. I'm analyzing this because things don't happen by chance. I've come a long way, and going back, although it was not at that time intended for me to come through to a position where now I'm seeking to become
President of
Ghana.
Right.
Basically, this is what I call the spirituality and divinity of leadership, because I was preparing myself
but you didn't know.
Unknowingly, because I was eager to have some public sector experience. So I left UAC and then went into, which was very unusual at that time, and went into one of the leading management institutions in Ghana at that time, called Management Development and Productivity Institute, MDPI.
Yeah, that's right.
At that time, GIMPA and MDPI were the two leading, I would say, institutions. MDPI at that time was responsible for all government activities that had something to do with private enterprise. So all the SOEs, all the institutions or agencies that were not typical civil service, all those agencies, they were, as it were, managed by the MDPI, meaning we had oversight in terms of the organization and management. So interestingly, for example, I'll just give you an example. I led the team of consultants to develop the new organizational framework for the Ghana Civil Aviation.
Wow.
Even though I don't have that technical expertise in that, but from a management and organization point of view, we were doing everything. I was one of the members of the team that actually developed the structure for GNPC.
Okay, before we go to GNPC, at civil aviation, what did you do?
So we our proposal was that we needed to decouple the technical aspects of the civil aviation from the airport management. So we created the airports company and then the civil aviation proper, which is what persists today.
I see.
So the different organizations, like I said, GNPC, Civil Aviation, all the state-owned enterprises.
I see.
So it really built my capability and capacity at the highest level of organization and management, you know, as a principal consultant of MDPI. So it was whilst I was with MDPI that I was actually also offered a fellowship, a Hubert Humphrey Fellow, to go to the United States University of Minnesota, you know, as a Hubert Humphrey Fellow. So I spent 1 year at the University of Minnesota as a Hubert Humphrey Fellow.
Were you coming
at the
back?
School of Management and Public Affairs.
Right.
So I came back.
Okay.
After that, after 1.5 years, I came back. And at that time, around 1990, still at MDPI, the UN started chasing me all over the place,
Wow.
asking me if I would take up the position of the director of a new program that the UN was introducing globally to develop entrepreneurs all over the world. They had started this in Brazil, South America, and the second place that they were looking to come into was Africa, and they wanted to start with Ghana.
Okay.
And they were looking for that individual who had that corporate experience that could build companies, build enterprises, you know. So they offered me a good deal, and well, I decided now to leave MDPI, even though I had a very successful career also with MDPI. And at that point, it was the beginning of a new path for me, because now I was responsible for building enterprises and companies and entrepreneurs. You know, remember, this is like early 90s.
Yes.
Early 90s. Who was head of state at that time? I can't imagine. But those were very difficult times. And the chairman of the Empretech board, the program was called Empretech.
Empretech,
The
yes.
chairman of my board was Professor Samuel Say, a distinguished, Ghanaian. He was one time governor of the Bank of Ghana. At the time that I was running Empretech, he was the chairman of Barclays Bank.
Barclays, right.
And so he was chairman of my board because Barclays teamed up with the UN to sponsor this Empretech. Fast forward. So I started looking for individuals who I thought had the potential to grow as high-level companies or enterprises.
That was your mandate?
That was my mandate. So I picked companies like, at that time, I don't know whether you remember Kofi Ansah.
Kofi, sure.
Yes,
the designer.
The designer. I picked Salma Garments. I picked Nora Bannerman, Sneaker.
Yes.
You know, all these were individuals who, on their own, were doing well. But my task was to build them into global companies.
Oh.
You know, that was the whole essence of this, to build them into medium and large-scale global companies.
Casapreco was one of them.
Casapreco, interestingly, he came, signed on to my program, and he was doing, it was strange. He came in, brewing, behind the scenes in Ungwa somewhere.
That's right.
And he came, but he took what I was doing so seriously, that he followed through everything that you were supposed to do. Preparing the business plan, linking them to banks, taking them into management training and things like that. So if people see what Casapreco has done with himself now, and if he were having this interview, he would tell me that it was all about Empretech and the experience that you got from me. Interesting, all the great names that you, Otin Jesse, Dr. Otin Jesse came through Empretech, Margins.
Margins,
Moses,
yes. I see.
Moses Beijing.
Yes.
Yes. They all came through us,
I
yes.
see.
Very interesting.
So,
Very interesting.
if you were asked to assess yourself,
Yeah.
how successful were you with Empretec?
Well, I would say that to the glory of God, about 60 to 70% of the high growth local companies in Ghana have all come through my program.
Wow.
Yes.
That's
And the interest is so, when I did this for some time, then the UN decided that it had become so successful that they wanted to create a new program replicating that in Africa.
okay, sir.
So, okay.
Kindly hold on.
Okay.
We'll go for a break. When we return, we'll come to the UN trying to get you to do it all over Africa. You're watching Alan Speaks Primetime Show. It's showing on Afrafranto TV, on YouTube, Pan-African TV, Bright TV, and I See TV, and many more. When we return, we will get the thoughts of our independent presidential candidate, Honorable Alan John Kojo Chamatin, on his exploits in Africa, helping to build businesses and businessmen. See you soon.
Ghanaians believe that their transformation will not occur on the back of parties, but on the back of leadership. It's a question of leadership.
You're welcome back. You're watching Alan Speaks Primetime Show on Afrafranto TV, broadcasting on YouTube. We are also streaming on Facebook, X, and Instagram. The program is also showing on Pan-African TV, Bright TV, I See TV, and many more. Honorable Alan Chamatin, let's look at the job the UN gave you in Africa. How did it go?
Very well. So I decided that I would replicate what I'd done in Ghana in selected countries. So I did it in South Africa, Mauritius, Uganda, Benin, Ethiopia, about 13 countries. But the beauty of this was that all of a sudden, I was able to build a network of high growth companies who were then across different borders, now beginning to realize that this was a new class of African entrepreneurs. And we would have annual meetings where my group of companies with groups from other countries, they would all come together and meet with those from Brazil. At that time, the program was also growing, you know. So then I had become the regional director for Africa for UN's program to develop entrepreneurs.
What's the program called?
Empretec.
Empretec, yes.
Empretec.
Now
So
for Africa,
once I took it to Africa, then I called it Enterprise Africa.
So
I took it to
Africa.
Enterprise Africa.
That's right.
And I was operating from New York. And I made a case in New York at the UNDP that doesn't make sense for me to be developing entrepreneurs in Africa and be sitting in New York doing that, and that I should be in Africa. But obviously, I wanted to come and put my foot back in Ghana.
Right.
Because I didn't mention this in the beginning, but in 1992, when we had the return to constitutional rule, I was one of the founding members of the MPP at that time. In fact, I was the chairman of a group called the Young Executives Forum. These were the group of young people who at that time had strong business and professional standing and had the capacity, you know, financial muscle to be able to support the party. So you can imagine, because I'd come out of the corporate sector, and then I was now working with the UN, and I was developing companies. So I was well positioned.
Well, yes.
Down to support the party.
And you were easily
Yes.
accepted.
Yes, no, so I was the chairman
Yes.
of that group. And interestingly, all the, I would say, the current leadership of MPP, let's say those who came after President Kufuor's group, you know, Kandapa, current Minister for National Security, Peter McMenu, the late Baredu, Kojo Baredu, Cecilia Dapa, Kwabena Japan, Courage Kwashiga, all these stalwarts of they came through the Young Executive Forum, and I was their chairman at that time.
Okay,
we'll
go into that. But yeah. Why did you decide to go into politics?
Yes, so I've always been very political, even when I was in the corporate sector, and because my attachment, emotional attachment to politics is about serving the people. And so even though I started my career in the corporate sector, it was still about serving the people. When I went into MDPI, the public service, it was still serving the people, doing things that, so I realized that it was only a matter of time that I would go into mainstream politics. But I was constrained at that time because I was working for the UN, But when I decided and they agreed that I could bring my headquarters to Ghana, Enterprise Africa, then I had an opportunity at that time to be able to do my politics, in the background. Yes. So it put me in a very strong state, as I said, particularly having already been part and having led the Young Executive Forum. So I was one of the youngest people in the party at that time who was part of the National Executive Committee of the Council at the highest level, with Darucha and all these big people, yes. Because I was representing the young people, not the youth.
Not just the forum.
Yes, but because
young
the
people
forum,
in the party.
Yes, the forum was basically the group that represented the young people.
Okay.
But these were not youth, but these were young executives. And that's why we're called young executive. So that allowed me, when I came back with my Enterprise Africa, still to be very involved, albeit behind the scenes. So when President Kufuor finally won power, I had been very instrumental in getting MPP to win the elections. So, long story short, President Kufuor gave me an appointment to go to the United States as ambassador. And he always says this story, that it is almost incredible to have a situation where he offered me the position of the minister in his cabinet, one of the first appointments he made, and I actually refused. I declined. And he's never forgiving me for that. And then later on, he decided that, well, if I wasn't going to accept the position of a minister, he needed somebody who understood, what America could bring to his government, So then he made another effort to get me to become the ambassador. So we went back and forth. Then finally I decided to go. But before I went to the United States as ambassador, I designed what was called at that time the Presidential Special Initiatives, the PSIs. Because what I told the president, this was like first month when he won power, I said, boss, look, you need to focus on something that will become your legacy. Otherwise, after 4 years will soon come, and you'll be engrossed in the bureaucracy and the politics that you end up not having any. But
you want to hit the ground running.
If it's a legacy, don't focus on infrastructural legacy. Focus on the legacy that will transform the economy. So I suggested to him that, look, Ghana has depended on only one commodity for over 100 years. Let us identify just 4 new sectors that could propel us into a middle income status. And let's focus on the private sector. Let's just, you go and do your thing, but let me set out of government, create this PSI machinery, focus on these 4 sectors, And interestingly, I knew why I was selecting those 4 sectors. It was oil palm, it was industrial salt, it was industrial starch from cassava, it was the export of garments and textiles. Because at that time, I realized through my own research that Malaysia, which had learned the cultivation of oil palm from Ghana in the 60s, had developed such a successful and thriving oil palm industry that they were generating almost $20 billion every year.
Wow.
$20 billion from oil palm alone, So thinking about it, I said, well, now, if we could do just half of what Malaysia does,
break.
Yes, we could earn $10 billion every year. And cocoa has helped Ghana, but we have never earned more than $2 billion from cocoa. So this was an opportunity to create new growth poles, and interestingly, if I recall, with the oil palm initiative alone, I was able, and this is not about government being in business. This was about government supporting farmers to increase their acreage. I was able to cultivate over 100,000 acres within a matter of 4 years.
Wow.
Whilst all over the years from independence, we hadn't done more than 20,000.
Wow.
Yes, 20,000. And that was all done by the multinationals,
Yes.
So this was a major initiative.
So you created the conditions for them to invest.
For them to invest. I was able to develop over 4 million seedlings. Wow. I brought new technology from Israel. And I totally revived this CSR. It's called, I think, the Oil Palm Research Institute. OPRI, Oil Palm Research Institute. With what I was doing, it was almost completely dead. But with this program, I literally revived the whole OPRI, because they had now to do the seedlings. So it was integrated value chain, and farmers were so excited. They could see that now they had a cash crop. Before then, oil palm, really, people were just doing a few acres, But this was a major boost. It's unfortunate that NPP lost power, and then unfortunately, the NDC did not continue the implementation of the PSIs, and but that's a long
So that was a legacy that you pressed upon President Kufuor to leave.
Yes.
Is part of it lingering on? Is it still there?
Unfortunately, I would say that the garment continued.
Yes.
The garment continued. So for now, we have one of the largest indigenous companies in Ghana. It's called DTRT Garments, and that was one of the companies I had trained in Empretech.
Oh.
Wow. Summer garments. And so when I started developing the PSI on garments, I picked all these people who had trained in Empretech, to come into the PSI on garments, because I was developing them to now sew for export. Because can you imagine, Ebenezer, that a country like Bangladesh earns over $30 billion.
That's huge.
$30 billion only from sewing, garments and exporting, particularly to the United States. So it is almost unbelievable that Ghana remains where we are now, and we have to go to the IMF for the 17th time. But it's about transformation, because I've been talking about these ideas, for many years. Can you imagine, interestingly, that my dissertation at the Faculty of Economics, when I was graduating, was on the structural transformation of the Ghanaian economy.
That has been in your
This
blood
is
then.
the early 70s, and
that-
I'm still talking about transformation. So, you know, sometimes
means
I
that
don't,
transformation-
I don't do it consciously, but you can
Oh, I
imagine
see.
if at the School of Economics in the 70s, early 70s, I was talking about the structural transformation of the economy, and I came into government. I was talking about through the PSS, I was talking about the transformation of the Ghanaian economy. Fast forward, we came into government under President Akufo-Addo. I was talking about transformation, and this time it was the One District, One Factory project. It was new strategic anchor industries like the vehicle, automobile industry,
Yes, right.
building industrial parks, the petrochemical industry, you know. So it's really been an exciting path, you know,
Of
to
consistency.
try and make a case
Yes.
for transformation. So if I have come to a point where now I'm talking about the great transformational plan, which is the subject matter of our discussion.
Series.
You can see that it is all coming together.
Right.
You know, I wasn't even aware that what you were asking me, asking me to tell my story, will bring us to the point where we are now talking about a great transformational plan. And a great transformational plan is anchored on a private sector-led economy, which is the enterprise economy that I'm preaching about. You know, you can't have transformation without an enterprise economy, which is what I've been talking about. And that really is the raison d'etre or the basis for this transformational plan.
And so for the transformation plan, people would ask, how sure are you'll be able to implement all that therein is?
Very good question. Let me put this in an appropriate context, because what gave birth to the Great Transformational Plan is the movement for change.
Okay.
Is the new political movement that I started when I exited from government. And the reason why I started the movement for change was that coming out of government, first, it was clear to me that we needed to move Ghana beyond the duopoly of the NDC and the NPP. If after 32 years of being in government, both the NDC and NPP having had the opportunity to govern this country, we are still talking about an economic crisis in Ghana. We're still unable to keep our lights on. We can't keep water flowing through our taps. We are still having almost every district, every village, every community crying about bad roads. We are unable to deal with the problem of public housing after 32 years. Then obviously, it is difficult to understand how we can make a case for both NDC and NPP to come back to government. It's difficult for me to understand how we make a justification.
Yes. The structural transformation you started talking about in your school days has still not happened.
It has still not happened.
So that informed your decision.
Yes, that's the first thing. We need a new political movement or vehicle that will move this country beyond the duopoly to pave the way for that structural transformation. Because I realized, having been in NPP, a dominant figure in NPP, that it was just not going to happen with the kind of political architecture that we have in our country. It was not going to happen. So I needed to come out to make a case for a new political system that would drive this transformation agenda. So that was the first thing. Number two, I was then concerned also about the deep polarization of Ghanaian society. We have a country where every single thing is politicized. NDC and NPP are fighting over almost everything. It doesn't matter how good an idea is. Once it comes from either of the two parties, there has to be a struggle or a fight. But this is not sustainable. We can't continue developing our country with a divided front. And so it was clear to me, this has to stop. Mm-hmm. And Ghanaians must realize that it is no longer sustainable. You cannot complain as Ghanaians that we don't have an economy, we don't have lights on, we don't have water, and still you want to still deal with two parties that are fighting. So you need an independent candidate that is selected and elected on his own merit and not on the merit of parties. Because it is because these parties are seeking power and securing their own interests and not the interest of government.
That's
basically
profound, yes.
These parties are empowered to secure their own interest, not the interest of, because if you are there to secure the interest of the country, what goes on? The struggle does not make sense. So that's why I decided to come out, establish the movement, and contest as an independent candidate.
So how's the campaign going so far?
I mean,
I see you are painting Ghana yellow.
Oh, and it's amazing, and it shows that, sometimes I think we underestimate Ghanaians. Mm-hmm. They know what the right thing is, but sometimes it's a bit slow, to come. And if you go around the country now, 60 to 70% of Ghanaians are clear in their minds that they don't want either NPP or NDC. After 32 years,
I see.
They don't want either NPP or NDC. They are looking for an alternative. So this is where Alan then shows up and says that, look, I can provide an alternative. I can bring the country to stop this infighting, which is not helping us. So that is where the gravitas that I'm having comes from. Now also, I've been around, so there's no village or community in Ghana where I will not be recognized, either by face or by name, And it's also because of the kind of things I've been preaching. And then also because people see me as a unifier. Even within my party, NPP, people realize that I go beyond NPP. People in NDC, if I were president, they would be as comfortable as if there was an NDC president, And I've left the NPP now, but I can tell you that the grassroots of the party are still very much in love with me. And if I become president, they know I'll look after them, So, all these things were driving my appetite to have a new political dispensation. But the third objective was also to avoid this winner takes all. Mm-hmm. So it's not about just the fight, but does it make sense that NPP wins power and everybody who has political appointment has to come from NPP? If NDC comes with the same thing. So it's like musical chairs. You come 8 years, you put your people there, then you change another.
No matter how good some brains are, they have to be kept out of.
And that is why you
governance.
Find that you'll be wondering, so how does this person get a position like this in government? You wonder. There are people in very serious positions and you wonder, so on what basis can we make such appointments? It's all about the politicization of appointments. So this winner takes all does not help us. It doesn't make sense that the country is losing its best talents because they are not in politics.
Some are even afraid. They are not in any party, but they have something to offer.
Yeah, they have something to offer.
But they don't want to be associated
because the political
of the nature of
system
politics
that we have now does not allow people who are outside mainstream politics to be involved in government.
And you want to change that?
And I want to change that. The fourth thing was also this desire. There was a sense that people are looking for a government of national unity. You know, a more inclusive government, a more representative government, a government where, yes, the labor unions have a say, a government where our traditional authorities have a say, a government where our teachers, our nurses, our farmers also have a say, where academia have a say, where, of course, the political parties also have a say, but not only the political parties. Because if all these stakeholder groups have a say, then what will be the basis of people going on strike? Because you'll be part of the decision making. So one of the objectives for having this movement is to establish a government of national unity. You know, I've been talking about government of national unity. South Africa is now talking about government of national unity. Kenya now. So Ghanaians have to understand that we don't have to go through the turmoil of South Africa, of Kenya, before we realize that the only option available to us now as a country is to have a government of national unity, which is what I've been preaching.
Okay, we will come back to this, but because you mentioned South Africa, I want you to take us on a journey to South Africa where President Mandela required your services.
Yes, interestingly, in 1994, when President Mandela came out of prison, he was faced with the realities of political leadership. He realized very quickly that the destiny and the lives of the black people of South Africa could not be transformed unless they had the capacity of owning their own businesses. So, if you recall what we are just discussing, yes, Alan, who has started this big thing all over Africa.
Enterprise Africa.
Yes, I'm in Ghana. So Mandela was looking for experts around the world who could help him develop black businesses. And I was one of the 7 experts that was invited to help South Africa develop their black businesses. And
How old were you, sir?
Well, now if you do the calculation, so this was 1994.
This will be about 35.
Yes, absolutely.
35
years.
years.
Yeah, if you do the calculation.
And you were one out of the 7 from Africa.
Yes, so I created Enterprise South Africa.
Oh.
And I was moving from one province to the other, establishing programs that will develop black businesses in South Africa. Wow. So this is outside government. So Ebenezer, that's why I keep on saying that if people are contesting to become president, let us judge their record not by what they've done when they came into politics, but before politics. What were you doing? What is your capacity? What's your record? It's because if it is only politics that makes you somebody who can perform, then that unfortunately is
so
not
compare yourself to the
other
other
And interesting, let me just add that.
Right.
It was around the same time, in 1994, when Time magazine, because of the new millennium that was fast approaching, Y2K, you know, everybody was wondering how the world was going to evolve, you know, with this 2000. So Time magazine started looking for the 100 leaders or 100 individuals who they believed would be able to control the world.
Wow.
Coming into the new millennium. So they were trying to identify the 100 top individuals in the world who they believed were going to determine the future of the world going to a new millennium. The first name they mentioned was Bill Gates. Because at that time, remember, he had just started all these things about computers in 1992.
Yes.
And we are talking 1994. They mentioned him. They mentioned John F. Kennedy Jr., who was just about to get into the line up for president of the United States. They mentioned one, Jeffrey Sachs, who is now one of the leading economists, development economists. This is 94. They mentioned Condoleezza Rice, who later on became
U.S. Secretary of
State. And they mentioned Alan Chemartin of Ghana.
Wow.
This is 94. So you can see that things have been connected for a very long time.
Okay, so how did you feel about that?
Well, I've always felt that God has a hand in everything. It's my mothers always say that everything that happens has a purpose. Anything that God allows to happen has a purpose, and every purpose of God has a lesson.
Wow.
Every purpose of God has a lesson, and it is when we are able to distill the lessons from what the purposes of God, then the blessings flow.
Amazing. So, wow. Viewers, you're watching Alan Speaks Primetime Show on Afrafranto TV, broadcasting on YouTube. There are several other TV stations, including Pan-African TV, Bright TV, ICTV, also transmitting this program. This is the maiden edition of Alan Speaks. We'll take a break. When we return, we'll come back to the movement for change and how the campaign is going so far, and do a little bit of the great transformational plan. See you soon.
Ghanaians believe that their transformation will not occur on the back of parties, but on the back of leadership. It's a question of leadership.
You're welcome back. This is Alan Speaks Primetime Show. This program, apart from the TV stations that are airing it, is also streaming on Facebook, X, and Instagram, and also Afrafranto Radio Online. Afrafranto, when you say Afrafranto Radio Online, they will say amplifying young voices. So that is around, and it's a group of young creative minds who have put this together so that they would push the message of the things that they require to push this country forward up for discussion, so that leadership will pick it and give them hope. That's Afrafranto Radio. Honorable Alan, you're welcome back.
Thank you very much.
Good. Let's finish up on the movement for change.
Yes,
and
so
how you're impacting.
So very, very much so. So I was talking about the pillars, the reasons why the movement came into being. There was this question also of manifestos. We have political parties that come out with manifestos. In the long run, if you audit these manifestos, it's just a catalog of promises without having any detail about how the promises will be carried out. So, having come out of a major party, established this movement, I made a commitment that I would go beyond a manifesto and develop a plan. Because a plan provides a sense of direction about how you will deliver your promises.
And it's more detailed than manifestos?
Completely different, So you're talking about policy prescriptions that will allow promises to be manifested. But if you look at a typical manifesto, it's all promises. I will stabilize the city. How that will be done, it is only when he comes into power. But it doesn't work that way.
I will cancel.
So if you say, I will bring free education, how that will be done, you don't talk about it. But I think that Ghanaians must now start realizing that it is not the sound bites. It's not the sound bites. It's not the promises. It's not the one-liners, that matter. Select people to lead the nation based on the substance of what they are saying they will do. And also check their record.
Yeah.
Apart from looking at the substance of what they are saying, do they have a record that justifies the fact that they can deliver that? So basically, we are going beyond manifestos to a plan. So that's why this is a great transformational plan. Then there's this issue of also constitutional reforms. This has been on the drawing board for so many years. You can have a constitution that was brought into being in 1992, and we are in 2024, and the kind of amendments that have been done don't go to the substance of the issues at heart. So we have outlined we have outlined a number of constitutional reform proposals, which we believe the movement would fight for. And if by the grace of God they elect me as president, I would ensure that these reforms come into being, because we have a long process in the past that had gone on without any results. And last but not the least, the movement also is inspired by the need for behavioral and attitudinal and mindset change in Ghana. Ebenezer.
That's what I love about this thing.
Yes, you see, because the fact is that if we want a strong, resilient economy, and we fight for that, and we do not change our mentality and our attitude and our mindset, so we will create and then destroy.
It's like having a terrible maintenance culture.
Yes, we'll create and then destroy with a kind of mentality that
I see the second sports stadium. What's the name of the second?
Esipong.
Esipong. The state in which it is.
Look at the whole airport. I mean, look, so many things that are in decay. And even look at our attitude towards environment. There's no discipline in this country. There's no respect for rule of law. There's no love for being a Ghanaian. There's no sense of pride, you know. But how can you build a nation without a positive attitude or mindset? You have an arrangement to meet at 10 o'clock, and the person shows up 12 o'clock.
I'll give you a reason.
And he comes and he's laughing. So my friend says, and he's laughing too. You know, as if it doesn't matter.
Yes.
And he comes and he's laughing. And he's laughing too.
That's a tall order low.
You know, so all these things are part of the reasons why the movement of change has come. And that's what we are fighting for.
Good. So now let's look at the great transformational plan itself. 3 words: great, transformational, and plan. How deliberate was this name?
So you've entered into my psyche now.
Wow.
Because these words were chosen very carefully. They are all pregnant with meaning, ready to be delivered if Alan becomes president. Great, because unless the transformation or change that you are looking for is significant, then it is not sustainable. So for any change process to be sustained, it has to be great. It has to be significant. So that's where the great comes.
Good.
And transformation also reflects a complete change in the components and nature of what you're doing. So, for example, our symbol as a movement is the butterfly. And there cannot be a better reflection of what transformation is than to trace where a butterfly starts from and then later on turns into that flying thing. So it is,
that's total transformation.
Those total transformation.
Means that it is transformation that you will not recognize its beginnings.
Oh, you said that's exactly what it is. That you transform to some extent that it takes on a new form, on a new state that has no recognition to where it started from. And so we're looking at the Ghana, and you made a very interesting comment in your opening remarks, that you are trying to build a country that will have no resemblance in the next 3, 4, 5 years with where we are today. And that is the promise of the Great Transformational Plan. That is the promise of the movement. That is what Alan is seeking to get Ghanaians to appreciate and buy into. Because if it took less than 30 years for China, with a population of 1.2 billion, to transform itself from one of the poorest countries to the second most powerful economy. This is as late as the late 80s. All this big talk about China. China turned around in 1989 because of a great transformational leader, Deng Xiaoping. Because China is an old civilization.
Yes.
Mao Zedong, all those who came after him. But China was still poor. It took a transformational leader with a great transformational plan in 1989 to turn, and this is 1989, just 1989, to turn China into the second most power. So the inspiration that I want Ghanaians to have is that it can be done, but you need a transformational leader, and you need a transformational plan. Otherwise, as the Americans would say, it ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. It ain't gonna happen. It doesn't happen by chance.
That's right.
It didn't happen, and it's never happened by chance in any country. You need a great transformational leader, and you need a great transformational plan.
And you see yourself as the one who has arrived for that.
Absolutely, and that's why it was interesting you asked me to talk about myself, and just off the cuff I'll be trying. So it's almost like having been prepared for this transformation agenda, all the things, now looking back, all the things that I've been talking about, it's almost like an invisible hand, and that's why I talk about the divinity and the spirituality of leadership. If you look at the story of Moses, and even Jesus Christ, it gives you a sense of this divinity and this what I call the spirituality of leadership, So these things don't happen by chance. And I want Ghanaians, very respectfully, to start reflecting more soberly, particularly at this juncture of our country's history, where we are at a crossroads. I don't want to sound like a prophet of doom, but if we don't get things right in this coming election, I don't know where we will be.
I'll keep this sound bite. Okay, let's now go to the GTP itself.
Yes.
Let's start. You're introducing GTP to Ghanaians on this program.
Yes.
What would that be?
So I would say that the GTP, and it's always important to let Ghanaians understand what they are getting in this GTP. The GTP says that, and where's your camera? This is the GTP.
Yes.
The Great Transformational Plan. From stability to growth to resilience to prosperity. Is very pregnant with meaning. Because what this is saying is that we are now in a period of instability. We need to move from instability to stability. That's ground zero.
Right.
Now, but when you get to ground zero, you haven't done literally anything. You are just on ground zero.
Right.
But now you have to move from stability to growth. You have to start growing on the back of the stability.
Yes.
And now, when you start growing, you have to grow in a quantum leap. You have to grow so significantly high that your growth becomes resilient.
Oh, okay.
And when your growth becomes resilient,
Wow.
then it doesn't matter what the shocks are in both your external and domestic circumstances. Your growth has become so resilient that you will never go back to where you started from. So when the government keeps on trumpeting that we are where we are because of the Ukraine war and because of the COVID-19 pandemic.
Yes.
These were two catastrophic occurrences, which without that had a negative impact on the whole world, not only Ghana. But those economies that had resilient growth have been able to survive. Those, including ours, that had structural vulnerabilities, that did not have the elements of structural transformation, are now in crisis.
Including ours?
Including, that's what I'm pointing to. That is where the growth and resilience becomes clear.
And lead to prosperity.
And it is when your growth is resilient over a period of time, then there's prosperity. And that is what we should aspire to. And this all can be done within a period maximum 10 years.
I see.
When people start talking about 30 years, then they don't know what they are talking about.
Yes.
I mean, from our period of instability now to our state of prosperity, 10 years. And that's the great transformational plan. So I have declared that if Alan becomes president, I declare 2025 to 2035 as the great transformational decade.
Wow.
Of Ghana. And that is where we'll become the new manufacturing hub for Africa. We'll become the new financial services center for Africa. We'll become the new research, innovation, technology hub for Africa. And we'll become the international financial services center for Africa.
Wow.
That is the transformation I'm talking about. And it's all here. It's so clear. It tells you practical steps to get to that point.
I see.
And maybe if you want us to get, but
yes, we'll
get
just
into it.
Get into it. We'll start with the introduction. What's the first topic that in this plan that you want Ghanaians to know about? So, for Ghanaians to understand that you need a holistic approach. A holistic approach that tackles Ghana's problems from all angles. It is only through that holistic approach that you can have that kind of structural transformation. So the first thing to understand about this GTP is that it is, as you've rightly pointed out, it's a holistic plan. And it has 6 different clusters or components. First, it starts with the economy. Then it moves on to talk about governance. And then moves on to describe what we need to do with infrastructure development. Then we come to social services, where you have health, education, youth, and sports. Then the 5th one is our environment and natural resource management. Issues around galamsey, climate change, so on and so forth. And the last concluding cluster or component is the mindset and attitudinal change. It is important, as I said, that we look at all these challenges as interlocking challenges. For example, if you have a great economic plan and you cannot deal with corruption, then obviously you are only going to have leakages with what you gain from your economic plan through corruption. If you create wealth and people have the wrong mindset and attitudes, then, for example, there will be no maintenance. You have a great infrastructure plan, no doubt about that, but you destroy your infrastructure because of the mindset of no maintenance culture. So all these different clusters provide an entry point for us to deal with these problems in a holistic manner. And transformation can only occur when you have a holistic and comprehensive approach. That's what we're, a complete change in the nature, form, and structure of what we are doing, which is a country, Ghana.
So if you take the economy, for example, as a cluster, that cluster is further broken down into first the macroeconomy. For example, what are you doing with inflation as a country? How are we going to tame inflation in this country? Because unless you're able to deal with inflation, then you are reducing the purchasing power of Ghanaians. If you reduce the purchasing power of Ghanaians, then we reduce the appetite of those who are producing to produce, because if you produce, people will not buy. And if you reduce the productive capacity of Ghanaians, they will have to lay off workers. They cannot recruit. If they lay off workers, government cannot get enough revenue from income tax, personal income tax.
Yes.
So it becomes a vicious cycle.
And if you incorporate tax,
Inflation is very important. But you also have to be able to stabilize your currency. If you can't stabilize your currency, it will have a negative effect on inflation. You have to also be able to manage your expenditure as a government. In your household, Ebenezer, you want to have the best meals. Your palm nut soup is kind of it's having all kinds of
everything in there.
Everything
so it's
in there.
Difficult for the ladle to go through.
Yes. Now, you want to chop nice soup. Meanwhile, you need the income
to support that.
To support that. If you don't have the income and you are eating nice and big, then you have to borrow to be able to sustain that lifestyle. When you start borrowing and you can't pay back because you don't have income, then your debt is mounting. And when your debt mounts to a certain point, then you no longer have access to that source of income.
You are describing a country called Ghana right now.
So this GDP tells you how we can control expenditure. A government that has over 100 ministers, how are you going to, how do you survive as a country?
And maintaining a minister is expensive.
And you see, that is why we have talked in the GTP about the fact that we reduce the size of government. And we have only 40 ministers. And you know what
they
that
have
means?
Deputies?
No, it's only one of two, a few ministries that will have deputies.
Right.
You know, so you have a situation where you can reduce, if you have, as we are proposing, only 40 minutes. Do you know how much money you save? A minister has a four-wheel drive Land Cruiser. You know how much a Land Cruiser costs?
No,
$120,000. They are also entitled to a saloon car. You know how much that costs? You're entitled to. So it's clearly not sustainable. The government's expenditure on just the public sector is not sustainable. And it's not only that. You have different departments and agencies crossing and falling over each other, all doing literally this. How do you have a ministry like Ministry of Energy that has so many agencies? Energy Commission, GNPC, National Petroleum Authority, Petroleum Commission, PURC. You know, so it's not just about reducing the size of government in terms of ministers.
Okay.
But also, all these agencies with overlapping mandates, you have to consolidate them. And the savings alone that you can make from this, Ghana will rise again.
Wow.
And also, it's not just about expenditure control. It's also about revenue optimization.
Right.
You see, once you reduce your expenditure, you also increase your revenue. And you can only increase your revenue if you are producing. If you produce more and you export, you get more foreign exchange. If you get more foreign exchange, it means that you increase the flow of dollars in your economy, and the dollars will put pressure on your city, because now your city has become strong and the dollar is chasing the city. And so you maintain a certain, just by exporting. And it goes back to the PSIs I was talking about. It goes back, you know, when I was minister, I was able to, just with the policy, without even spending $1, one city, just with the right policy, I was able to bring 5 out of the 6 global vehicle assembly companies, auto companies in Ghana, within a matter of 1.5 years. Right now we have...
So it can be done.
We have Toyota, that's assembling cars here.
Yes.
We have Nissan. We have Kia. We have Hyundai. We have Peugeot. And we have Volkswagen.
Wow.
And the amazing thing is that, you know, these vehicles that are being assembled in Ghana, state of the art, very robust, very strong.
Are they transferring technology to Ghanaians?
But that is actually the icing on the cake.
Wow.
Because all these skills that are being employed are all meant now to grow our industrial base.
It's getting very, very interesting, and we are tempted to go into it.
Very
So
well.
we'll stop here on the economy.
Okay.
And when we start the GTP
Proper.
next week,
Yes,
God
yes.
willing. Thank you very much, Honorable Alan Kojo Chamati.
It's a pleasure.
What we have heard has whetted our appetite for more, and we're expecting you to come again next week. And from what I know, we'll look at the youth, and there's so much in there that they need to know to attract people who previously did not even want to go into certain sectors of the economy like agriculture, to go there and make it big. So I'm looking forward to that. Viewers, you have been watching the independent presidential candidate with a plan, Alan John Kojo Chamati. He believes so much in the plan that it will transform Ghana into a state that we may not recognize after 10 years. So we will come again and listen to him step by step, giving us the exposition as to how it will happen. So don't miss next week's edition of Alan Speaks Primetime Show. And this 14-part series, you have been watching the first episode on Pan-African TV, Bright TV, ICTV, Afrafranto TV, on YouTube, Afrafranto Radio Online is streaming it. And on Facebook, it's there, Instagram, and all of it. You will have to follow us to get all the information you need to make a decision as to who governs the country come December 7, 2024. Thank you very much for your company. It's been warm. I've loved it. We'll meet again next week. Bye-bye.
Ghanaians believe that their transformation will not occur on the back of parties, but on the back of leadership. It's a question of leadership.